The 6 steps to fabulous are decide, awaken, evolve, embrace, embed, and adopt, where we go from overwhelmed, anxious and fearful to empowered, confident and in control. So step number 1, decide. The very first point, the very first step for the fast track to fabulous is step number 1, decide. There are certain things that we need to decide. And I'd like to differentiate decide from hope. This is not about hope. This is not about hoping that things will get better. This is not about hoping that the weight will fall off, hoping that we're motivated to do exercise. At this point in one of my workshops, this was a major aha moment for one of my participants, because when I talked about this point, what she said to me was, it just dawned on me, Helen, that I never ever decided to lose weight. I've been struggling with weight all my life and I've only hoped for it. I never actually made the decision. So all my life I've been struggling with my weight, and I would go on this yo-yo pattern of dieting, binging, putting back weight. And then what would happen is there'd be some sort of function, some sort of wedding, some sort of social event where I would then lose the weight after going on a diet, look terrific for the function, and then because I've deprived myself of all those lovely foods, I would have a binge session and put the weight back on. And so it was this endless cycle, it never finished. Until 2005, January 2005 to be specific, we had a major wedding in our family. And it was the first time that I wasn't able to lose the weight for the wedding. Usually every function that I had, I would lose the weight and I would feel quite good about myself during the major social event. At this particular event, even though I had tried to lose the weight, I was the biggest that I had ever been. To top it all off, I had to wear a girdle. So this was something that disgusted me, because I had to wear a hardcore, heavy-duty girdle that went from here to here so that my stomach could be pushed in. And I felt terrible. I felt old. I felt far older than my years. And I went to this wedding, and people who hadn't seen me for a while saw me, and they probably didn't notice a thing, but I felt awful. I felt old. And I decided the day after the wedding that I was never going to be that weight again. What I did was I picked up a photo of myself when I was much younger, when I was a little girl and I wasn't carrying any extra weight, and I said, that's who I really am. That little girl is under this body. I'm carrying all this excess weight around me, and that excess weight is going to come off. I made a decision. There was no buts, there was no ifs, there was no hows. I had decided that this was what I was going to do. There was no doubt about it in my mind. And this is what happened for me. So I went on this journey of losing weight. I lost 14 kilos to be exact. And whilst I was on this journey in terms of losing weight, it then changed from losing weight to becoming fitter and stronger. So my focus changed. But I'll talk a bit more about that later. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to differentiate between deciding and hoping. So I'd like you to go to your workbook at the moment, and in your workbook there is a decide versus hope exercise that I would like you to complete. Now I'd like you to think about one thing that you decided in the past that you succeeded at. One thing you decided and you succeeded. It could be that you stopped smoking. It could be that you decided that you were going to be a particular type of mother. It could be that you decided that this is the employee that you were going to be. It could be that you decided that you were going to achieve, get through some sort of challenge. I don't know, but you do. And then I want you to name one thing that you hoped for in the past and you didn't succeed. One thing that you hoped for and you didn't succeed. And what was the difference? What was the difference between those two things? So what I'd like you to do now is pause the audio and go to your workbook and specify what those two things are. One thing that you decided and one thing that you hoped, and what the difference was for those two things. We're still on step number 1, decide. So previously you decided didn't hope, you decided. Now that we've decided and not hoped, what are we going to decide? The first thing that we need to decide is what side of the equation are we going to be on? Are we going to be on cause or are we going to be on effect? What side of the equation are we going to be on? Now, this concept that I'm about to explain to you is quite a complex one, so I really want you to understand it completely. This changed my life when I understood this concept. And the best way for me to demonstrate this concept for you is for me to show you the responsibility for change diagram that I've created behind me here. So what I'd like you to see is that in the vertical axis, we've got full responsibility. So at the very top, we've got full responsibility, and at the bottom of the axis, there's no responsibility. Now on the right, we have a positive event happening. On the left, we have a negative event happening. So what I would like you to tell me is, if you take no responsibility in your life, but something good happens. So you haven't taken responsibility, but something good happens. I wonder what state you're in. Who are you? Many people at this stage will say, well, that's just a fluke, or it's a coincidence. In fact, basically that's right, you're just lucky. You're lucky that something good has happened in your life, because it's not because of you that this has happened. It's just a good event that's happened in your life, not because of you. Now we go in that other quadrant where we've taken no responsibility once again, but something negative happens this time. It's not a good event. Something negative has happened. And the first thing that people say to me when I ask this in workshops is, unlucky. That means you're unlucky. It's unfortunate. That's true. You are unlucky and it is unfortunate. And so when you're unlucky and it's unfortunate, who are you? When you're woe is me, all these bad things are happening to me. Why me? It's always me that gets sick. It's always me that something happens to. It's always me that needs to look after the parents. It's always me. You hear it all around you all the time. You're a victim. That's who you are. You are a victim. You have no control. Things are constantly happening to you. Now, if we move up and if we take responsibility, so if we take full responsibility and the same negative thing happens, and we take ownership, who do we then become? We become empowered. We become in control of our situation, so that even though something bad has happened, we're in control of the situation. What this means is that if we're in control of the situation, we can change it. So then what happens is, when we take full responsibility and something good happens, then we're successful, we're the victor. We're no longer the victim. So what side of the equation do you want to be on? The bottom quadrant, the bottom half, I should say, is where you're at effect. And the top half is where you're at cause. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be at effect or do you want to be at cause? The most important thing that you need to know about this concept is that it doesn't matter whether it's a good event or whether it's a bad event. It doesn't matter. The point is that you have the power to change because you're empowered. This is a very important concept, so I really want you to think about this in your mind. That whether the event, I'm going to repeat this again, whether it's a good event or whether it's a bad event, it doesn't matter. So what people usually hope is that they go from being a victim to being a victor. It doesn't work like that, because then that's just chance as to whether you're a victor. We need to go around the corner. So where we need to go is become fully empowered. We need to take responsibility. So a lot of people say, well, there's a lot of things that you can't take responsibility for. I want to clarify that responsibility does not mean fault. I'm not saying by taking responsibility that it's your fault. For instance, you could be a victim of crime. That doesn't mean you were to blame for that crime. However, you can take full responsibility in terms of the way that you react, in terms of whether you decide to forgive your aggressor, whether you decide to move forward or to be held back. That's what I mean by responsibility. Responsibility has nothing to do with fault. When you truly take full responsibility in your life, your whole world will change. So even though I believe that I've mastered this concept now of taking responsibility, this is something that tests me continuously. It could be that I'm having a lively discussion with my husband, and I think that he's to blame. And what I have to sit back and think about is, well, whose responsibility is this relationship? It's my responsibility to make sure that I have the best possible relationship. Therefore, I need to think about perhaps how I communicated, what my role is. So it's not about who's at fault, it's about who's responsible. Responsibility is something that we need to understand and take very seriously for everything. Responsibility for value. Even when you buy a blender, whose responsibility is it? Is it yours or is it the shopkeeper's? When you buy a car, whose responsibility is it? If you bought a lemon, whose responsibility was it that you bought a lemon? Perhaps you didn't do the research adequately enough. When you go out for dinner and you don't have the meal that you planned for, whose responsibility is it to make sure that you actually enjoy your meal? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that you communicated appropriately to the chef if you had any concerns about the way that it was to be made? And this training, when you undertake this training, whose responsibility is it to make sure that you actually get value out of it? Is it mine or is it yours? Because I can help you. I can give you all the tools, all the strategies, all the techniques, all the tips that would help you succeed in your life and become fabulous. But if you don't do anything with them, then it ain't my responsibility because I'm giving it over to you.